Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Andrelczyk Amusement Academy number 6. Thank you guys for joining. Today we are going to look at pre-1990s looping coasters, so mostly Arrow and others. But we're going to go from there. So let's turn off the music because I already muted it on stream. Well, Ollie, hope the audio squares itself away. I'm glad it's working for everybody else, though. If this is your first time here, then welcome to Andrelczyk Amusement Academy. I do this every week. We pick a different topic and we go through how to build things realistically in the game. I am a real theme park designer at a large park in Florida. And I'd like to take the knowledge that I have from real life and apply it to the game. So that's how we end up with this whole video series. I do post the archives of this to my YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed to that, check below in my profile here on Twitch and you'll find a link to it. So you can go check that out along with other tutorials and reviews and park reviews and other things like that. We'll continue to expand this as things grow along. So good news, Ollie, that's running well now. So what's on the docket for today? So I have just a couple here, and then we can always expand if we find ourselves with some extra time at the end, or there's some requests out there. So what I've got for today, first we'll just do a standard Arrow corkscrew, because it started it all. Then we'll look at the Schwarzkopf looping coasters. We'll look at a Vekoma loop and cork. We will look at a Togo sit-down. We'll look at a traveling Schwarzkopf. We'll look at Vekoma megalooper and Arrow megalooper. Then we'll look at, and these are out of order, we'll look at a Togo stand-up, and then we'll look at an Intamin stand-up. So I tried to focus on everything from basically 1990 beforehand. There were some other suggestions out there, such as a Soquet looper, Meisho, Hopkins, and some other ones, which are also pretty good options, but I only have so many that I want to put in here initially, but those can be maybe some added stuff or save for another stream perhaps. So before we jump in, let's first take a look at the coaster database, as we always do. And again, if you are new here, our drinking game is if I forget to go from this database screen back to RCT, message me in the chat and then take a shot, because it's gonna happen, and it always does. So this was the first modern day inverting roller coaster. So I'd say not looping coaster because it didn't loop, it corkscrews. But this was 1975. This is Knott's Berry Farm, Arrow's corkscrew. And this still exists. It runs up at Silverwood in Idaho now. So a little bit harder to get to, but still chucking after a number of years. Still looking pretty good. The Schwarzkopf looping coasters were actually second, even though you usually see that referred to as the first modern looping coaster, which is true. It was the first looping coaster, but not the first inverting coaster. So differences there, but all semantics and marketing stuff. But it's a pretty simple layout, as you could see earlier. Actually, let's back this boy up and let's look at this. So you have your station, turn, lift, turn, drop, turn, corkscrew, corkscrew, turn. It's a bunch of right-hand corners and right-hand corkscrews, and that's pretty much it. It was made to be compact, it was made to be cheap, and they sold a whole bunch of these, actually. Just the standard corkscrew model, they sold 14, and then they also had a loop and corkscrew model that sold an additional 7, so it's pretty good, and they went all around the world. There's still a number of them operating in Asia and elsewhere. Alright, so let us jump back into the games. We're not taking a shot just yet. But, start with this. The biggest problem with this, and honestly most of these mega loopers, is that the corkscrews in the game aren't on the diagonal. And this whole game is kind of built on your orthogonal dimensions and everything, so the corkscrews on this end up getting screwed up. So it's not ideal. We can get around it, and you kind of have to be okay with how the modifications look. In my opinion, I am more apt to go out of my way to make sure the corkscrews go in the correct direction than to not. So that's kind of where my interest lies for this kind of thing. All right, so first thing we're going to do for building this guy is we'll go shorten this up, and we're going to go down to a 6-car train. So these ran 6 and 7, but mostly 6. These were available in a 1-train or a 2-train model, so you could do either one. If you do the 2-train, you can do a transfer track, either like Knott's has before the lift hill, or like other ones have, you can do it after the at the brake run. So let's start with our. So some of the key figures here is you're going to drop out of the station, just a little quick drop. Doesn't have to be much. I just did one. You want to make sure your station is big enough for a 6-car train. Corkscrew trains are huge in this game, unfortunately. So I honestly probably need another station piece in here, which we'll put in, just because the game is going to be a little bit weird about that if you don't have the hacking turned on. Pull up our nice ASMR audio here. All right, so once you get up to the top of the lift hill, and actually I'm gonna stop it right about here. We might adjust this a little bit later, but we're gonna come off of that lift hill with a little bit of a drop off of the lift, so not too much, but we're gonna go a couple. We can either go 1 or 2. So you can go 1 or 2. I'm gonna go 2 because I am gonna bank this, and the real one is banked. And I'm going to keep it flat. You could do a helix if you want to pick up some speed, but what we're doing is the large one. Now, unfortunately, the real ride is a little more nuanced in the fact that, you know, it's a pretty tight corner up there, but we can't hit the station, and you don't want to put a straight piece. I really would advocate for never, ever, ever putting a straight piece in between corners when it's a continuous corner. I don't really even like changing radii. I like to be consistent, so we're gonna keep it like this, and then go and so you can do large corner, small corner. I just, for one, I like to have my station platform, so at least I can have a straight piece of sorts. But it's all personal preference. I like to have my little one gap there, and that's it. So really what you would get typically on this is you'd pick up to a... I mean, if you had your loop and cork, you'd put your loop here, and then you'd go up and around. So now it's just a matter of going around the corner, and then typically you'd start your corkscrew pretty much right here, and then you'd corkscrew diagonally over into the brakes. But since we can't do that, we're gonna run ourselves down a little bit. So let's actually go ahead and back up first. I will put block brakes on this to run 2. All right. So you can kind of do it in a couple of different ways. And none of them look particularly fantastic, I will be honest. But that comes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're 1 too many. Back that up. And then here we go. And we'll keep the corkscrews a little bit off of the ground just because our elevation change is going to keep that speed a little bit there. And then we can come up actually and come off of this, and then you can use a helix downwards to just give this a little bit of elevation change. So we're going to go ahead and do this and then come back in. Hey Scoop, thanks for joining. All right, so that's kind of my thought as sort of the better RCT attempt. Now, obviously, you can go and do a corkscrew in the other direction if you want. Some people like to have it where it curves around and corkscrews out and then comes back. It's just I just prefer to see it this way, where it's going in the proper direction. I mean, you have your sort of no man's land here, which you can use as a queue line and some other stuff. Almost all the real corkscrews in the world have some kind of interaction with the corkscrew itself, whether that's like a midway coming through, like at Cedar Point, or if it's a queue line coming through, then you know, not too bad. All right, sheep, enjoy qualifying. It's predictable at the top. So if you do a transfer track, like I said earlier, there's a couple of different options for you. You can kind of come out here and in this case, I would put another straight piece here at the bottom, and then kind of push your whole lift hill out. Put a straight piece at the bottom of the lift, and at the pull out of the drop tube. But then you can kind of throw in a transfer down here. I tend not to do that one just because I like it kind of back here. So instead, you can put it on the side here. Couple things to note on this, and we'll go ahead and throw our second train in here just so we can compare. All right, so just to make sure we have the right amount of space, we'll back up one here, and that should be about right. You really want 6 or so, and then we're going to go in here and put some brakes. That. So then the way that this would operate is you'd have your transfer track slide over, train would come in, stop on this, and then it would slide back over onto the other side. Some of these parks have a maintenance bay up underneath, so this would sit back a little further and then drop down and go up underneath. That's an option too, but for the purposes of this, you might as well just leave it here. Not too many of the standard corkscrews had a second train. Actually, almost none of them did, so it's more of a one train operation kind of thing. So that's generally where I would stick. But let's give this our Nagashima colors, because I do like theirs. They just recently redid it. And then we can do a red train, for example. Right. And Ollie, I'm reading your thing here, so Twitch integration. So I'm pretty excited for that. So yeah, definitely use those little arcade point redemption things that you have. Eventually, my channel is going to have stuff with that, and I'm thinking that with what Ollie's working on, we might be able to use those. So we can definitely take a look. Aerosports has special supports on the corks. How would you do that? You can do it in a couple of ways. You can pretend that it's happening later than it actually has, and just use standard supports. You can also, and I've seen this before too, with varying levels of success, you can come in here with the impulse track and then do something similar to this. Comes across it. It's a little bit beefy, to be fair, and I don't think it always looks the best, but as far as lattice supports, you're going to get it best look like this rather than, say, scenery pieces. At least at this point, nobody's really made a custom scenery piece that's specific for this kind of a thing. But that's kind of a good option right there. You can do the Giga track. Ideally, it would be banked to one side, but you can't bank that on the steeps. So this is probably your best option there for it. So anyway, that's an easy one, and we'll call this corkscrew, which is aptly named because pretty much all of them are just called corkscrew, and we will go for that. Done. Okay, so next up we are going to thank you also, Ollie, for the subscription. All right, so let's get to Schwarzkopf coasters. Go back to the database here, and there we go. So first thing we'll look up is Revolution at Magic Mountain. Sorry, I'm also catching up on the chat at the same time, watching Ollie play with things. It's very interesting and beyond my scope of knowledge. All right, I think there's a good shot in here that's got the whole thing. At least I think I had seen one, unless they've since removed it. Here we go. All right. So this is Revolution at Magic Mountain, and this is the first modern looping roller coaster. A couple interesting things about this is that even though the loop is the center of attention from the pathway and kind of the way everything is set up, it's not the center of attention on the ride. It actually happens like 2/3 of the way through the ride. You can see that loop there after the first drop, and another turn, and another helix, and then setting up for that drop into the loop. You can also see that this does pretty much nothing super aggressively. It's got a couple of steep drops to it and some corners and helixes, but it's all pretty well stretched out, and you have this really long approach to the loop, which is kind of a cool thing on the rail ride as you pick up speed and kind of see that loop getting closer and closer before you go through it. I mean, it's kind of a simple thing now, but back then, I mean, that's a huge deal that you're going upside down on a roller coaster, especially one that was just lap bars at the time, since the corkscrew coasters were always just the horse collar over the shoulders. And yeah, sheep. I'm a huge fan of the where the trees are not fully grown in, where it's like just brand new like this, and there's just nothing built around it. It's just pretty. It's pretty fantastic. So, good news for you, MOT, is that it does not have the over the shoulders anymore. We're back to lap bars, which is good news. They did get new trains here pretty recently, and a new paint job. It actually looks really, really nice. So they've since improved, and it's looking really, really nice. So there's the shiny new paint job with Tatsu in the background looking fantastic and also needing a paint job. But it's pretty great. I've only had one visit to Magic Mountain too, but I'm a huge fan. All right, and then the other one of this same era was Super Duper Looper, which was actually my first looping coaster. This being at Hershey Park in Pennsylvania. So this one opened 1 year after Revolution did. And it's a much shorter layout, and it's also more terrain following. So it's actually works really well over the creek that's nearby, and just has a lot of kind of fun stuff with it. I'm pretty nostalgic for this one, even though it doesn't do terribly much of anything. It's a fun ride, and they've also gotten some TLC recently, got new trains a couple years back, and it's still running strong. So happy to see the parks taking care of these guys and just doing a nice job for all of that. So let's give this a stab and see. Now, I feel like terrain is one of those things that you really want more than anything on these guys. But we're gonna build it here flat, and then we can always add some terrain here in a little bit. So the coaster that it mimics is the looping coaster, of course, but a lot of the track was the two rail lateral or ladder track. So we're going to use the mini coaster track to build this, and then we'll change over for the loop, and then we'll change it back. So this track did come a little bit later, but it's there's nothing wrong with using it, but we're going to just start with this one. All right, so let's start kind of reasonably high off of the station here. Let's go ahead and change our train ahead of time. So we're going to change it over to looping coaster train. We will go down to 1 for now, and 6 cars. So 6 cars is about right for these. Generally, for the most part, on most coasters, you're going to average between 6 and 7. So you can kind of go either way. We only need 5 pieces here, and we're looking good. And yeah, for Mindbender at Over Georgia, which was 1978, and also Shockwave at Texas, Six Flags Over Texas, those you can use the Giga Coaster track, which also looks pretty good. All right, so we'll come out of the station with a chain lift, and actually, we're going to start the chain lift earlier on. So Super Duper Looper, actually, for the station itself, there's a chain drive that runs through the entire station and out the front, and then it transitions to a second chain lift on the lift hill. So we're going to continue that chain out, and we use stable support limits here. And for this one, since we're going straight out the front, we would just consider it one big chain, which is what was used for smaller traveling coasters, like the Schwarzkopf Silver Arrow model, and some of the other ones. So let's go a little bit more, and then we'll cap it there. So we'll start at this level, and you can have a bit of a flat on top if you want, or not. So we're gonna disengage straight off the lift hill, and then can go steep, but I think to start we're gonna actually kind of do a bit of let's, come back up. All that the start of our drop. Do our smooth drop on the bottom. Come up. So these are really the followers to the Schwarzkopf speed racers, like Whizzer at Magic Mountain, which was, or at Great America, which you really kind of saw as the first coasters that did this kind of stuff. Um, like fast corners, fast smooth corners. I mean, really, before you were looking at mine trains and things which were bouncing around the track and just really uncomfortable altogether. So this was a huge change from what was there before, and it made a difference. Um, and so this kind of a looping coaster would have been a huge thing too. Just the going from what you had before to something like this, which is much smoother, much more well put together, just a better ride overall. See what we got here as far as speed goes. Alright, it's not too bad. Ideally, I'd like to cross this diagonally here, so what we might do is put another straight bit in here. Especially with these early Schwarzkopfs, is you don't have to be afraid of straight pieces. Like, that's totally fine for this kind of a ride. But you'll notice too that I am breaking my usual rule of never having track on the ground, which means we're going to lower that. You can get pretty close with a Schwarzkopf because there's not a whole lot of transition between lap bar and, or the track and the footer. Column connection is pretty short, see, and you can go pretty close to the ground, but we're still going to avoid that just because it's kind of best practice to not. Okay, so we'll have a little kind of dive around like this. So coasters don't have track on the ground. Like real coasters don't have track on the ground. The exception are older wooden coasters and things like that. And the reason behind it is when you consider the track to column connection, or the track to footer connection, the column, base plate, and things like that, you don't have track on the ground. So the ultimate is another one there. So, hey, Coffee, what's up? So like the ultimate, for example, is direct bolted to the concrete strip footings they have underneath. And being that that was something built by British Rail and kind of janky, not surprising that that one's a little bit strange. But for the most part, any real modern coaster, you're just not gonna have you're not gonna have track on the ground. So in RCT, I always recommend pulling pulling your stuff up off the ground, just never having it touch. And if it does touch, which it does here, like I didn't want to totally avoid that, just go ahead and adjust it. It's not the end of the world to do so. Okay. I think we're gonna get ready for our loop here. See what our pacing looks like going through this helix. Come up. Kind of a slow arrival up here. I'm actually gonna not bank. We'll put our block brake here. There's several coasters that have hit deer, I guess. But Ultimate did have a very memorable deer explosion, which was probably less good of a memory for the people in the front seat. But you know, now they got a pretty good story to tell. The wheel one fell off. Maybe I have not. I don't recall that one, but it's not necessarily surprising. Okay. So a couple things we can consider here is we're set up to have our loop right next to the station, which I don't necessarily want to do just because of the location of where everything sits. So honestly, I'd consider let's go kind of sprawling almost, and we can go over here and do it, or over on to the other side. So sprawling is probably a good word to describe Revolution and Super Duper Looper. They just kind of go off and do their own thing. So it's just really a matter of how you want to treat that. We can kind of go in a number of different ways, but why don't we go this way? Put our brake run underneath of the lift hill as this. Change this back to a circuit real quick so we can still test it. Our speed is doing. Okay, now we're going to do this cool approach to the loop. And then we'll do go ahead and do the looping coaster loop. So if you go in here and you have your cheats enabled, then you can change this temporarily to looping coaster, put a loop in, and then we'll go right back to mini roller coaster. Go. Let's see how that runs. And we'll put a dummy loop back in there once we're finished, but this way we don't have to worry about merges or any other fun stuff like that. Might be a little bit slow. Yeah, a little bit slower than I think we want, so let's get in here, because I did make the lift hill maybe a little bit smaller than it probably ought to have been. We are sort of making a terrain coaster after all. And Schwarzkopf coasters can have some hang time, but really the loops are pretty quick on these typically, so you're not going to have a whole ton of random hang time, but not to say you won't. See how this one does. Better. A little bit slow still, but not too bad. Okay. Now it would help if I was able to see what I'm doing here. So the real one of these has a, well, both of them have the adjustment on this. So yeah, you could adjust the brake speed if you didn't want the block brake, and there's ways to cheat a block if you really want to. I prefer not to cheat the block and still have block brakes on there, so we'll kind of leave it at that. Hopefully, when the new save format comes and open, we'll be able to adjust that, which I've heard we're able to, or we will be able to, but you know, time will tell, and we will see. So the real Revolution has kind of a little tunnel, and then it pops out, and you come out through the center, and then you continue on. It's a little bit forced. Super Duper Loopers is a little less forced. That one looks a little better, in my opinion. This one right here is absolutely forced, and it doesn't necessarily look great, but it kind of matches what's going on. Yeah, I remember that too. The block brakes didn't slow down. They just adjusted the speed to whatever the speed carried. It was such a weird design. But RCT had a lot of, or RCT3 had a lot of weirdness in there. Okay, and then trying to get back up to where we were. We are going to do another kind of final helix here, just because Schwarzkopf loves his helixes. Helices. Oh, if we here, yeah, we can. Actually, that's going to work out fairly well, because that will let us put our brakes back here. Back to mini track. Turn. And we'll put some more block here. Block I did. And kind of back it up from there. Yeah, Sheep, it always gave me the feeling that the people who made RCT3 didn't necessarily understand coasters. They just kind of copied stuff out there and then made up the rest. Were always a weird bit to me. I could never quite understand that. Alright, block section mode, 3 trains, let's go. Challenge with looping coaster versus mini is that there is an elevation difference on the track, so it looks a little strange. But typically you kind of want to hide that look just a little bit. Okay, so now we have our fun little terrain coaster. Kind of goes all over the place. But not too bad overall. Split coaster was a real concept. That was something that Setpoint put together at one point. Granted, they never sold any. It's a good thought. See how it looks. Looping coaster, whole thing. Actually, probably a little bit better. Too bad. We notice we're just a little bit slow on the block brakes there, so we should probably go back through and add another block back here. Ensure we get through that faster. But yeah, I kind of like that at the invalid heights. Let's see how the train runs on it. I think that might be the better question, because if the train looks awkward going through it, I'd rather have the transition being awkward and the train being okay than not. Yeah, that mid-course is set about at the right spot because it gets through just as that other train crests, which means that we don't have to stop it, we don't have to adjust, and all of the rest. If this is going to clear it in time, or if we still need to move that back some. We'll need to move that back some. Fine. We're just barely there, and honestly, the operations typically would not really require, or we would have the dispatch be a little bit slower, so it shouldn't be an issue. Real thing. But I do like when blocks naturally work and you don't have to force it. Crazy to think that RCT1 was, no blocks or anything like that. It was a very strange kind of time with all that, considering that, it's so second nature now, but it wasn't the case back then. Round, finish it up. Let's see if we got it right. Yeah, that's a good strategy. And especially for the ones where it crashes. If you don't really have to run the blocks to make sure you get things right. All right, so there we go. A little bit sprawling, but not necessarily an issue there. But sort of a small something or another. And yeah, that's kind of the thing for me, and that's why I comment on a lot of like contest entries for RCT and stuff to say like use use the brake or use the block brakes. Like I I don't I feel like there is really zero situations where block brakes aren't an improvement over not. You can make the argument on like a flying turns or something where you just adjust the dispatches so it goes through the brakes, but pretty much everything. Um, but yeah, it's a shame with Dynamite Blaster because I always liked the layout on Dynamite Blaster. It was a good ride. All right, so let's look at the next option here. We are gonna go back to one. Well, we will. Oh, go here. All right. So Python at Efteling was or is a Vekoma double loop corkscrew. Granted, it's since been completely replaced track wise by CSM, is a Belgian company, um, but it still has kind of the typical double loop, double corkscrew look. So it's kind of a larger take on what we did earlier here with the um, two loops and two corkscrews. You kind of see the loops there. See the corkscrews there. There's four of these. And amazingly, all four are still running. There's a good shot of it. It's just kind of far away. There's a helix at the end. Trying to see if I can find a better shot of that. Let's look at Shaman. Oh, you're just here. Duh. Let's try this one, Deverland. Alright. Yeah, that is the challenge, Belgian guy, with the um, with the launches. It does interrupt a little bit, especially with something like Cheetah Hunt, or for example, where you want that rolling launch in the middle. Um, so it's not necessarily the best, but you kind of take it or leave it. But all right, so we're gonna do pretty much the same thing that we did earlier here, just it's gonna be bigger. Let's go over here. Now these can have. Oh, go. Now these can have a couple of different things. As far as trains go. So there are 7 cars per train on pretty much all of these, but some of the arrow varieties, which are pretty much the same thing, have a 6-car train. So you can kind of go for either one. We're going to go for 7. The only downside for that is that our station ends up getting larger because the corkscrew trains in this game are just gigantic. Seven. So generally you're going to have one car per station for those guys. Okay. Lift hill is going to be a little bit taller on this. What are you thinking of that has 4? Unless I'm not remembering quickly. Okay. So the real one has the loops kind of high up, we're going to imitate here. And then we have a choice to make. The real one goes goes to the left and then to the right. For our purposes here, I'm actually going to make a change on this one and go to the right, just so that we can get a station in there. Oh, both loops to the left. Yeah, that's right. So you can go either way. If you're gonna do it, the loop's going the proper way on the ride, then the whole thing is gonna have to push out, including your turn up here. I like to avoid that if we can, so we're gonna just do 1 and 1, and then kind of call it a day based on that. Have this sort of per corner here. Now the challenge we run into with this is the corkscrews don't take up a whole ton of space, but we've got a lot of space to make up, considering that your helix is almost back here. So that's a good 20 or 30 squares. So you can kind of go with a bunch of different options here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. And these also are right-hand corkscrews. Almost kind of go in. You really, the challenge with recreating these kind of things in the game is that you end up with a lot of dead space. Is what we're getting here, which is also why I've put blanks in between a bunch of things. So we have a straight piece here, we have a straight piece here, we have a straight piece here. And honestly, these corkscrews are far too far away from the whole thing. I would prefer to have them a little bit closer. But the helix portion of this is to the right, so we can kind of do something similar. Fast our corkscrews are. Pretty quick. Definitely quick, but not totally awful. Now as you get into the helix, there's a couple of things you can do with this. The downward helix that doesn't really have a ton of variation as far as elevation goes. But what we don't really want to do is end up with something where we're coming out, then we're going forwards, and then we're turning again. Like, I really want to try and avoid that. That's just going to look bad. So what we'll typically do is you can kind of stretch it on this end, which is not my favorite. It's not necessarily a good look, but the look that works. So that's an option just because there aren't a whole lot of larger turn pieces. As you can kind of see with this, I mean, the point being for something like this is that it's just not a good looking ride in the game. I mean, in real life with the diagonals and everything, it does look pretty nice, and it's nicely done overall, but I don't think this translates well into the game. And it's really spread out. It's further spread out than it needs to be. Not necessarily something I would recommend. Like, the other thing you could do here is come back on this. Here, the challenge you have is your corkscrews are really high up off the ground. Which, if you play your terrain right, is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's not necessarily accurate as far as all of that goes, and then especially here towards the end, you have this extra runway. But this is what I meant earlier, where the diagonal part, even though it looked bad, was taking up a lot of the space that would have been occupied by this. Into the weirdness of helix. Where now the helix is underneath the drop, but it's a potentially better option, a little more compact. Go ahead. See if we can't get rid of one of those. Don't work. This is a Vekoma double loop, double corkscrew, similar to Python at Efteling, Shaman at Gardaland, and 2 others out there. So we've done Arrow standard corkscrew, which is here, and then we've also done a Schwarzkopf looping coaster. As ugly as a Gardaland coaster can be. So not bad overall. Definitely stretched, and the corkscrews, in my opinion, don't look great. I have seen Efteling colors. All right, let me back here real quick so I can see if I have them right. It's what, sort of whitish with no, it's almost a tan color, but we'll call it white. Would you call it white? Okay. It looks a little bit off-white to me. The trains are reddish orange. Looks good to me then. Well, there's no airtime hill on the real thing, so if we're trying to run this in a semi-realistic manner, you don't really see a lot of airtime hills on these rides anyway, so we'll just avoid it entirely by throwing in the straight bits. The example here is that if you want to build it realistically, here's how you do it. My recommendation is you just don't build it at all in the game, and you do something different that's a custom layout that looks better. I would say the best ones of these are really something like this corkscrew coaster, where it's still compact enough that it looks okay, and it's all right. But it's not a good look. Not that bad. It's not ideal. That's not. Find this. Just fat. It's large. Very large. Yeah, this is the one that if you're gonna build one of these, I would just do this. But yeah, I would love to see the game get diagonal inversions, maybe with the new save format eventually. Who knows? All right, we're cruising along here pretty well, and let us move to the next one. Okay. So the next one we have is Togo Sit Down. There's a couple of different options that we can do here. So Togo, being a Japanese company here, built kind of a number of these rides. Some of them became stand-ups, such as this coaster here, Momonga Standing and Loop Coaster at Yomiuri Land. So it's a pretty simple layout, actually, where the loop goes around the lift hill, which unfortunately we can't really do unless we go with a diagonal lift hill, which you can do. I'm just not quite keen to screw around with that at the moment, so we'll avoid it. And then we have a helix and then a turn up. So they have since converted this to a stand-up coaster, where it's got a stand-up train and initially had like a stand-up train and a sit-down train. Stand-up train was added later, but now it runs two stand-up trains. Or at least it did when I was there. Actually, no, it didn't. It was one sit-down and one stand-up train. So you can actually see the station here is pretty cool, where it has a load and unload on each separate side, and one side is the sit-down train and one side is the stand-up train. And then one side loads, and when it's ready, it slides over, runs the layout, comes back, and then comes back over. So it's pretty interesting. So all the original stand-up coasters from Togo were converted from a sit-down to a stand-up. So that's kind of explains why none of them were super comfortable, because your ride center line changed. One credit scoop. It is one layout, just happens to have two different trains. So I count this as one, even though I rode both sides. If I had only ridden one side, it would still be one. So that is my credit stamp of approval, I suppose. King Cobra in 1984. This was the first ground-up stand-up coaster that was done, and we're going to get to this here in just a little bit. We're going to build a stand-up Togo, but there's a couple other ones. So let's see here. This one at Sebanuenchi was pretty early on as well. So this one had a loop and then two corkscrews at the end. There's also let me find it. Is it this one? So there is this double one here, which I also rode and was very good. This one has a stand-up train, two stand-up trains now. Used to have a, or actually, sorry, it has one stand-up and one sit-down. It used to have two stand-ups, which is kind of interesting, but definitely a pretty cool ride on the whole. I'm actually a huge fan of Togo coasters. They got a really bad rap because their American ones were pretty poor, but the ones in Japan were great. Like, really, really good. So, cannot fault them for that. Let me just search for the one I want to get. Himeji Central Park. Hurricane. So this one, which is fresh coat of paint, is a loop with an airtime hill, two corkscrews, and a turnaround at the end. So this was an early variety of one of these guys. This was 1981, one of the earlier ones here. The cool thing about this, I always like these supports, because the support is basically the ride spine, just opposite, mirror imaged, which I love. Super, super cool, really interesting design. Structurally, super interesting too. I mean, it's a clever way to keep the thing stable. So I'm a supporter of that. All right, so we're gonna just kind of see where this goes. I'm not necessarily, I guess I'm kind of basing it off of one of those, but we'll see where it ends up. Let's go over here. Let's get some space. They do have a little bit of a snap at the top. I don't remember anything substantially good about it, or strong about it, I suppose. But they are, pretty decent. All right, so we're gonna take the limb coaster. If I can find it, we're gonna use this one. Nobody's made a custom Togo sit-down train yet, so this is the one that we're gonna take for today's. Yeah, I highly recommend if you ever get a chance to go to Japan and check out some of these. They are really, surprisingly good for um, for what they are. Okay, a lot of these early Togos have a flat bit at the top to get the whole train on the flat, make it easier to disengage the chain. So that's what we're going to do here. Kind of looking at Hurricane to see what theirs has a little dip right here. Do that. And the challenge being is that we're just really far back already. But that's okay. One thing that Togos I have noticed is that they are really intense as far as the loops go. So this is going to be a pretty fast loop here, I think. But I'm pretty sure that's going to be just fine. Let's take a look. One thing, if you really want a realistic Togo, is once you get the thing done and open it up, slow down the lift hill to like 2 miles per hour. For whatever reason, a lot of the Togos had excruciatingly slow lift hills, which could take upwards of a minute to get to the top of. Let's see what our speed is here. We're at 12 off the drop, 49 at the bottom. That's pretty okay. These trains are bulky, so they're going to look a little weird going through that. Okay, and then we're going to put in our weird airtime hill. Actually, what we can do, end that a little bit early just to let us get corkscrews in here at a reasonable speed. Yeah, that's much better. You could almost do this as a terrain coaster. Go backwards, get our brakes in here. Turn this back to circuit. Test. So, I do kind of like the crossing there. It could be fun, but we're going to keep it. This form. And yeah, it is very interesting. The Japanese coasters were super janky and are super janky, but a lot of them ride surprisingly well, which is just always terribly interesting to me. See how fast that airtime hill is at the end. That's going to be a little bit much, I think. Maybe not, because it's actually losing speed reasonably well, so that should be fine. The key to these is really just being simple. You don't need to do a lot of stuff with it. This is probably enough. Oh. Mode. There we go. Now I did mention the one at Seiban Yuenshi, which let's jump back real quick to that. This one had a little bit more going on for it because you can kind of see it has this return run hill, which maybe we'll go through and see what we can do. Here's a good shot of the layout. So we have the loop, then we have that airtime hill into the. I kind of like this little curve to get the diagonals to line up straight. Then we come around some other bits and curves, and then a couple little airtime hills. They're super forced loop threading, which is a little bit strange to me, but still not a bad idea. So let's do something maybe just to keep this interesting. Maybe we can go up high. Oh. Yep, take a shot. First one too. I thought I had gotten pretty far with that. Back to this so we can test. The real one, so there's a couple of POVs out there, although one of them is a Scream or a theme park review POV, so don't watch that. But you can find a couple of POVs out there that show this coaster, and it crawls back to the station. Yeah, Scoop, if I forget to change back from RCDB over to the coaster, you're supposed to take a drink after you let me know. We've only had one so far today, which is not bad, I would say overall. That's fair. Enjoy your memes responsibly. Yeah, no one's getting plastered yet. I think 3 streams ago we probably would, because I remember having screwed up a lot. We'll do. Go up and have like a flat bit here, maybe. Hydro, don't make me cringe too hard. Ugh. And TPR. See what kind of speed we've got on that flat diagonal. Pacing is not necessarily something you have to worry too hard about, especially on some of these Japanese coasters, because some of them are terribly awkward as far as all that goes. There's a chance that actually doesn't meet clearance checks, because I just realized I have this on, but we're going to go with it. I want to see if I think this is going to thread. Yep, it doesn't, but we're gonna roll with it. There we go. Yeah, Big Boom was interesting and had some incredible airtime in the back seat also. Like, it is a wildly strong coaster as far as airtime goes. But the rest of it is just really weird and awful. It's not a good ride. Okay, and then we'll cross back underneath. And we're gonna do some kind of airtimey hills. Airtimey. Some kind of Togo-esque, just kind of back and forth bits. Yeah, no bank. The real one doesn't really have banking through that, and this one, even though it takes it at a little bit of a speed, it's not bad. I would say. I can live with it. Trying to figure out the best way to bring it home. Well, and that's the thing. If it doesn't work in RCT, then you can pretty easily just change the stats so that they do. Nobody uses the stats anyways, so we're just gonna roll with it. We'll actually do. We do it like this. It's in the middle here. If you look at it again, you can kind of see it's pretty darn flat on there. So you can kind of it's more banked than not, I would say. Or sorry, other way around. It's more unbanked than not. And we'll do kind of thing that feels terribly Togo-esque. I do this flat corner around, and I'm off by 1, so straight again. Ooh. Make no mistake, this is not intended to be a good coaster by any means. It's rough looking, and it's kind of close to what you would see by a Togo. I think you could easily do some much better refinement here to get it a little bit smoother, but you know, this is similar kind of layout that you might see from them. So let's go with the Hurricane one, which is green track, red rails, and blue columns. So exceedingly ugly is the answer. Up that lift hill down to 2. It's still too fast. Let's bump it down to 1. There you go. There's a Togo lift hill. It kind of does. You're right, actually. This does look remind me that connects the original next coaster. This is a pretty janky layout, though. Gotta say, it is rough. But we're done. Let's call that one complete. This is a Togo sit down. Name I've already used, so Togo sit down. Space. Cool. Honestly, my favorite Togo that I've made so far was the hyper one that we did in the hypercoaster stream. What was that? Andrelczyk Academy 3, I think. That one turned out really, really nicely. But oh, we're almost to the top of the lift. Struggling. Almost there. Almost there. There it goes. Trying his best. Little chain lift that could. Alright, so that was horrendous, but we're going to get rid of that one. Done. Okay. So, we're actually cruising here. Hour 15 in. See you later, Ricardo. Thank you for coming by. Yeah, I did. So if you go to my YouTube channel, then you go to the playlist for Andrelczyk Amusement Academy. Each of the various file or sections has the download link. The only caveat to that is, for whatever reason, the launch coaster stream number 5 from 2 weeks ago, I didn't save it. I saved like half of it. So we have up until we did the B&M wing coaster, and that's pretty much it. So I can always go back through and try and recreate some of the other ones, but there were some questionable things as we were screwing around with all that last time. So I'm not gonna bother too much. I did upload some updated things, so like the wooden coaster stream. That one's got a couple of new coasters in there that I had basically taken the layout that we did on stream and then actually taken time and improved it. I never want to give the opinion that these layouts that I knock out here on stream are like a final and done layout. You really shouldn't ever bang it out right away in one go and then be done with it. You have the time to think back through it and adjust it and make it into something a little bit nicer, which is maybe what I'll do with this Togo one later. But it's it definitely is an iterative process, so don't sell yourself short by not doing that. Okay, so next up, Schwarzkopf traveling coaster. So let us jump over, nope, not that one, to the database. And let's look at Chimera, RIP. So unfortunately this coaster is closed and will remain closed because there was a bad accident in which 2 people sadly died because of basically a lot of deferred maintenance and other things, which is a shame because it was a fantastic coaster and I could make the argument for it to be in my top 5. It's a great ride. Operating not quite like it should have here in Mexico. In Mexico, all the brakes were wide open, and the little miniature lift hill in the side there was operating with almost like a launch. So the laterals were extensive, to say the least, and the loops were intense. So it was a shame, and it certainly is some reminder of the hazards of coaster riding in second and third world countries, because you don't always know how the maintenance is. But it's a shame because I thought it was a great coaster, so I was a big fan. But so it goes, and here we are, unfortunately. So what we're gonna do is try and build one of these. So I built one of these in Feria do Flamingo, the head-to-head 8 park that I did review on the channel. So it was a fun one to build, and I'm going to try and do something kind of similar to it. Yeah, Mexico unfortunately does kind of seem like the place that these go to die, which is a bit of a shame considering that they do take decent care of some of them, as in the what is it? Bullet at Selva Magica is actually very well taken care of and is running great, which is nice to see, especially with as questionable as some of the other ones are. Okay. So, trying to remember how I did this the last time. This is one of those where you just have to pay attention to how tight everything gets, and how squeezed in all of the various elements are. Almost looks a little bit large. Actually, what we're gonna do is jump over to Feria do Flamenco. Make sure that I've actually saved this properly, though, so we don't end up with some trouble. But back to this. Alright, so here is the one that I built for Maria do Flamenco. We'll go back and try and do something similar. Support work is kind of the key thing for this one, and really defines how these are built. So these rides are built stacked as best as possible, since they were made to be portable on the fair circuit. So you have all of these different layers that are stacked up, and you wanted to make sure that you that they kind of follow, you know, similar paths every time, so that you can combine the supports to everything. So you see all those lift supports that flared out and then pick up all the tracks below it. So it's really a key thing as you're building these to really go back through and try and get that sort of a coverage on this thing. So I was pretty happy with how these supports turned out. It was tedious as anything, but certainly worked out. So let's jump back now that I was able to take a quick peek at what I did here, and it looks like it's 1, 2, and then up. Okay. Right. If you want to see more of that park, I did do a review in my channel, on my YouTube channel, so go check that out. I was pretty happy with that park. It was built with Rumi and Ultro on New Element, and they were both great to work with. Certainly happy to do it. It was a losing effort. We lost to a superb, really incredible park by Robbie92 that I can certainly not fault. It was incredible, so that one is also worth checking out. All right. The other key thing with these is to make sure that you end up having your turnaround set so that you're not always making right-hand turns. I think that's a trouble that a lot of people get into when they build these kind of coasters, is that you have such a tight array of space that you don't ever use the diagonals or turns and cross back and forth. So you end up with something that's just entirely like a racetrack where it's just all right-hand turns. I really don't recommend that if you can avoid it. Try and get away from doing that kind of a thing. Okay. Let's do here, and we're trying to keep this as compact as we can. We're going to get rid of the straight piece there. Probably back this whole thing up, and thanks, Hydra. I'll take a look at that here later today. I always like seeing people's takes on these, and honestly, these are some of my favorite coasters to do in the game. I think they're a lot of fun. See if we do a little bit too shy on that. This instead. All about seeing how absolutely compact you can get. At some point, we're going to have a corner in there also. You don't have to worry too hard about, see here. Do turned off. Have that flat dip, then we can this properly. That will almost act as a second lift hill right there. Because what you want to do also on this is you need a lot of block breaks. A lot of block breaks. Do you want to be able to run, say, 5 trains on this thing without it stopping, maybe 4, maybe less, but I mean the fair circuits were all about capacity, so they were buying these coasters that could deliver a huge capacity boost to manufacturers or the showmen. Try and get him sort of centered looking at least. And go ahead and at least see what we're doing as far as casing goes. And some of them, depending on how things are running, don't all have to have block breaks. So like this one's not going to have blocks up top because there's no way that a coaster is going to get there fast enough. There you go. And we'll keep the 6-car train. We don't really want anything longer than that because it's just becomes a little too unwieldy at that point. You're really going to see 6, 5 or less. Generally 5 and 6. Right. If I remember right, those 2 flat unbanked corners were incredibly intense on the one that I had done. So if you're building this for heaps and for ride ratings and things like that, don't, because it's not going to work. But I don't necessarily build that way. Oh, no, that's not good. Oh, there we go. So that's what you have to look out for. Something like that. Wonder, though, we can't. More often than not, the difficulty here is with crossing over the track and trying to come up with a way to get the way to get going in the other direction, because I'd almost like to take this loop in the other direction, but not necessarily going to cooperate, I don't think. Big run just to maintain speed. Really, it's just to make sure that you can check. For one, you can check the speed, and for two, I mean, it does generally act as some kind of a block, whether the train's going to get there or not. Curiosity, I don't think it's gonna squeeze in. These kind of rides are what I like to generally refer to as trial and error coasters, because it's what you're gonna spend a lot of time doing. You gotta have some patience to deal with the endless kind of monotony of trying one thing, trying it again, trying one thing, trying it again, and all that. This lift hill that I'm putting in here is entirely unnecessary. Real thing is using it at all, but just try and be a little realistic here for it. So unrealistic here being the coaster on the ground means that this whole thing is going to end up raising up one, which is fine. I don't mind that, but to consider. True. See how we do. These loops are taking a decent speed, so not too bad. A little bit of hang time there, but not awful. Have our brake run here. And that guy is struggling a little bit, but not awful. I'm okay with that. You really have to be thinking kind of about what you're going to do with the end of the ride while you're building the beginning of it, just so that you have the ability and the time to come back and adjust some parts and pieces. Um, so, like, I know that I'm going to end up having to put the station down here somewhere. We're going to go ahead and that. We already said we're going to put this down one more. This, that way we keep it off the ground. Something that feels kind of correct for that. So now kind of the goal is to at least get some kind of left-hand turn in there somewhere. I mean, you could easily just end it right here, but I'd prefer not to if we can avoid it. Put some big corners back through here. For that last one all lines up. So if you keep notice here, every one of the brake runs so far has been in this line. So we want to make sure that they all line up, whether it's exactly on this line or one next to it, so that all the supports and evacuation stairs and everything can kind of be almost a constant. And the other part of this is just trying to figure out how everything thread through, you know, just so is not necessarily the easiest. And I think if I remember right, I kind of went underneath on the last one. How do you mean? You have to hold control, or I'm scrolling with it, but it's another one of those shortcuts that I should maybe know, but I just don't. Challenge here is that you end up kind of running into the drop on this side, and then you have your raised loops on the backside, which are actually going to be good to go underneath of at some point if you can turn it around. Oh, very cool. That's convenient and something I didn't actually know. Amazing having played this game for, oh, I guess the majority of my life, and there's still weird stuff like that to discover. What award was that? There are a bunch of stuff. The most vibrant colors award is the one that I had always thought was weird, because that was something that I never knew about until I had looked up. Park with the best custom rides. I think I get that one a lot because most of my rides are some kind of a custom something, but it is sort of that weird, like the ones that just kind of show up like that, and you're just like, what is this? Where did this come from? I'm about to give up on this and come back later just because this is being pain, and I feel like not wasting the entire stream watching me run into things. Yeah, it's Hydro. It's like a custom ride that is, what was it? It was like over 6.5 excitement or something. If you have to have 6 of them in your park, it's got a weird metric, as I remember. Something sort of like that. Yeah, 0 clearances. Yeah, I wish I could just take the one that I had built. That would have been easier. If I have one saved. Actually, I do. So let's see what I did. Okay, so this one did have a flat bit here. This did cross back over, and then that track was backwards there. See if that does anything differently for us. Need to watch out because some of that was just too no. Oh, come on. I hate when this thing breaks. We do boat hire? How about that? Oh. Well, tested then because I. Oh. Had 2 different rides open. That's why. It would help if I weren't stupid. But yeah, the vibrant colors one is weird because it's like, I think I ended up reading it on one of Marcel's videos or something, but it's like you have to have rides painted in like the bright green, the bright purple, the bright pink, or the bright orange maybe colors. I've never actually gotten it by just playing. Alright, let's see how this runs. Let's see if we can make it through this loop. The loop is a little bit offset from the other two. I would kind of like it to be centered, but I'll live with that. Or I can't because it's not going to make it. What's the elevation difference here? 10 to 1. So 1 is all that I need is to get that to work. Means that I gotta do is run it out here. Or at 0 is gonna be even quicker. Booster time, never. Never, ever, ever. I am a firm believer in not using boosters. Except where they're necessary. But it's few and far between, my friend. I'm a firm advocate in if your coaster can't make it first time, then it probably needs to get redone. Now I will say boosters used as a shoot, a launch, that's fine. Go for it all day long. But boosters as a means of this, I can't get behind it. We are gonna go the opposite way. Essentially, I'm just recreating this other coaster, but purposes of the stream, we'll finish it. A little bit fuzzy in here with as far as how you're doing supports and things like that, especially with some of these tracks being underneath. And this is where the lack of good diagonals in the game comes in. There really aren't good options for pretty much all of that. Oop. Let's see if we can make this. If it can go higher, I'm going to go there. I just want to make sure that this brake run can sustain it. If it can get up to 8... Oh, shoot. Alright. Alright, see how this does. It's gonna struggle at 7, so we're gonna just leave it at that. Let's see where we are. so what I did on this one was drop this down. Came back up for the block. Down. I'm actually one outside of. Makes me wonder if I can. In. Always fun. So this is where you have to trade off: is do you want to go through and make it fit exactly? Because here's where it's not fitting. Or do you want it to go outside the columns? And in this case, I'm just going to say make it fit. So let's see how this does. Back up just a little bit here. This or do that. Okay, so we will take block section mode. We'll take 5 trains. Block break cannot be used directly after a lift hill. Okay. Then we're going to get rid of that block break and just put in a regular break because the lift hill is going to act as a block anyways. So that's a decent way to do that. Well, let's see how this runs with 5 trains. The goal is to run this without stacking at all. Stacking, I mean, we have one behind the other. Let's take a look. The ratings be damned, because we're not going to have decent ratings on this as far as that goes, but that's fine. The ratings don't matter in this game. You can just change them. Alright, so we're clear of that block just before we get to the next one here. Which is good. That's what we want. Struggling through that loop. Big question is, are we going to clear this block, which I'm a little bit questioning on, considering that's struggling hard to get to there. Just barely, not really. That's something that we ought to revise. This one here. I kind of like the larger corner there. And I had space on the other one. Makes me wonder why I'm just dealing with a little less momentum here than before. Or what? Well, that's fine. We're gonna be fine with that. And yeah, sheep. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Is it's just trial and error. And to be honest, I built this one because I had already built this one. I've done a number of other ones, but this is the one that I know well enough to be able to do. So it's not much, and that's fine. So we'll do Something like that. But we'll stop just a little bit then on that lift hill, is fine. For realism purposes, as far as the overall design goes, I would use the ladder track like we did for the other Schwarzkopf for the lift hill and for the brake run. It also gets rid of the sort of bulky old Schwarzkopf brakes here, which some of the newer trains don't use. Being that we discovered earlier in the stream that the mini coaster and looping coaster aren't quite the same elevation, you could also use a junior coaster track. That's what I used for the Chimera clone in the other park. It's not the best, but it'll work. So I'd think that one's just fine. Right. So there we go then. That's pretty good. So we have one train stacking, which is fine. We could make that an unload station if we wanted. But on the whole, it's moving like we want. We got 5 trains in motion right now, which is pretty cool. Always nice to see. And if you do use this in scenario play and adjust the rating so guests will ride it, this will eat people like crazy. It's a pretty incredible ride in that case. But anyway, we'll call that one complete. That took some effort. I think that probably took more time than all the other ones combined, but done. All right, so we are now over halfway. Got 5 out of the 9 in total. So, as we always do around this time, we are going to take a break. So, I am going to turn on our rock music again, and we're going to play... let's see, I heard somebody said earlier that they like the mysterious water music style. We're going to go with this, Mystery. And I am going to step away for a minute. I'm going to run some ads, so help support the channel and all that kind of thing. But in like a minute to 90 seconds, I'm going to be back, and we're going to take on some mega loopers. So get up, stretch, go get a snack, go get a drink, and come on back, and we'll get on to some new coasters. We'll see you shortly. And just like that, we're back. So let's fade on out that water music for right now. And there we go. Hope you guys had interesting ads or something, I don't know. But anyway, we are back to it and looking at the Arrow Megalooper. So, these fall under the category of Arrow Custom Looping Coaster. So custom looping coaster was anything that wasn't one of their standard models. So it wasn't a corkscrew, it wasn't a looping corkscrew, it wasn't any of those standard things. So the custom looping coaster could be big, could be small, could be kind of whatever. So there was a couple of really big ones that kind of stand out as notable. Three of them at Six Flags parks. Only one of which still exists. So we have this guy here. This is the Great American Scream Machine, which is gone now, unfortunately, having been replaced by Green Lantern, the stand-up coaster relocation from Kentucky Kingdom. We also had Shockwave at Six Flags Great America in Chicago, also gone, replaced by Superman Ultimate Flight, the B&M Flying Coaster. And then thirdly, we have Viper at Magic Mountain, which thankfully still survives, even if it is a little bit rough and a little bit unpleasant. It's a piece of history, so we shall be nice to it. But it's pretty kind of cool to see what these rides kind of do. They're just massive, and at the time they were world record breakers as far as height, as far as just overall scope goes. They were just massive. Let's go over to Viper real quick and take a look at that one. So there are 24 custom looping coasters, and not too many of them still exist. Here's Viper. So the interesting thing about these is that the way that Arrow did a lot of their calculations at the time were based on inversions that were all the same size. So they had inversions that were a certain size and a speed that they hit them. So they just raised the ride up or down until it hit whatever that speed was. And then you have something like this where you have a loop that's just stupidly high off the ground, and a couple other loops that are a little bit lower, and then just some really awkward shaping. Not the most comfortable by any means, but it's kind of neat. You got the Batwing element here, which Arrow called the boomerang. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, the Superman Ultimate Flights were okay. The Over Georgia one at least has a little bit of terrain in it, although it killed a Schwarzkopf looping shuttle for it, which is a shame. I actually had a pretty good time on Viper at Magic Mountain. It's imposing. It's just pretty crazy tall. Good ride, I think. You just had to ride it in the right seat. So, let's take a look. We're going to do this. Okay, let's get our corkscrew coaster. And we're going to back up the drop, which is sort of the better option here for some of these. All rollable. Change this over to coaster. Oh, whoops. I'm playing with our scrambler down here. Just this guy. Gives us something to play with here. Yeah, it's Six Flags. They loved their Vipers, their Ninjas, and all their IP stuff like Superman and such. Ended up becoming kind of one big giant buzzword. Let's go with this. There have been a lot of these done, and a lot of them done pretty well. So I'm not gonna try and make the best one out here because there's a lot of people who have done much better ones than I will do. But there's a lot of different ways to do this. Let's see here. Fair weird coaster name. Family Banana Coaster at uh, Yokohama Cosmo World. I've always enjoyed Family Banana Coaster. Um, Sky Scrapper, which that's a translation issue, but Family Banana Coaster less so. There was the W Face Coaster in Japan. There's another, I'm sure, translation weirdness. Still interesting. Although I like Dododumpa, or well, Dodumpa, not Dododumpa, because it was the musical Dodumpa, which I kind of liked, because initially it had sort of a musical theme to it, which was kind of neat. Ooh, that's too much. These are going to run 7-car trains, the big ones. So you can forget, you can leave the 6 at home, make a much larger station. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I do like Laurent though, I will say. I know everybody really likes to hate it. And it is a weird situation. It going up into this loop. Like it's a huge elevation difference, and then all of a sudden you had this little tight loop and you're 100 feet in the air. Sort of an oddball thing. I mean, these were really close to the first hypercoaster sizes. This is around the same time that Arrow was building the first hypercoaster. Yeah, hopefully the border will open up there soon for you and you can go check it out. All right, a little bit too slow. We're going to back it off by 1. Down. The transitions on these coasters were poor at best. You don't have to worry too much about it. This one, for example, Hydro was 188 feet tall. Viper at Magic Mountain. It had some height to it. Let's see how we do on those. That might actually be too fast for those second loops. We can check it out and see. That's better. Maybe a little bit fast, but not bad, honestly. I'm fine with that. And this is where I would love to be able to use diagonal brake runs, because I would absolutely do a diagonal brake run right across the drop here. But sadly, we don't get those. To do this, but we're going to go ahead and back this boy up. Get rid of these flat bits in between. Make this whole thing a little bit more compact. We'll keep the one in between. Did always like the corkscrew chain lift noise in the game. I thought it was nice sounding anyway. I really hope this can be a fix soon, so we can still run the ghost train even after having the block. Good custom scenery, custom supports on these rides just are incredible. Like it really ups the level of quality for these kind of coasters, and I just love the look of them. If you ever do one of these, I do recommend getting some kind of nice looking custom supports in there. Yeah, I mean, in some cases, the ride definitely does look better than it runs. Um, some notable exceptions. Dragon Mountain at Marineland, I'm a huge fan of. That's a great ride. Okay, see how that goes. Yeah, yeah, Kyle's is looking really nice. He did a very good job on that one. So we wanted to almost come to a complete stop there for whatever reason. A lot of these old arrows did that. Now it's just a matter of trying to get it back to a point where that may not be a bad interaction, perhaps. Um, I kind of like the large half loop. I've seen it once or twice, um, but it's not a bad take on it. So the one of our other colleagues on New Element was doing one of these, and the way that he did it was a large half loop like this as the inversion, which I kind of like. It's different and it's definitely non-traditional, but it doesn't look too bad once it's themed. Um, so it looks smooth enough, and it honestly fits, say, early arrow, like or sorry, late arrow, like uh, I think Tennessee Tornado. That's something you would see on that kind of a ride for sure. All right, I wasn't super happy with that, so we're gonna do something different instead. But one of the things too with your boomerang element here is you probably want one side to sit a little bit lower than the other one, so that's why I have one extra drop element or drop piece here and on the other side. Yeah, I feel like you can occasionally mix large and small helices. I do that on a couple of ones that I've got, um, and it can look good if done kind of where it doesn't become too much as far as helixes go. We're gonna corkscrew these to the left, which is pretty rare. You don't see this terribly often. Yeah, mine train is definitely the way that you're going for that kind of thing. Go in here and do a 1, 2, 3, 4. You're 1 off at the moment. What I wanted to do was of an ending helix here, but that like it may not cooperate. Okay. All of that. To be honest, I don't know why right turn corkscrews are more common, um, but it's pretty darn rare to have the left hand ones, and I couldn't honestly tell you why. Or I could ask around at somebody who may know, but how it be. This brake run is maybe a little bit long, but honestly not too long. And the more that I look at this helix, the more I don't like it. So we're gonna just here you go. 3 trains. Okay. So this is the size of a brake run that you want for a ride like this, where you want to have the station, you want to be able to hold both trains behind the station, and then you want to be able to have at least one train's worth of slowdown beyond that. So essentially with station and brakes, I've got 4 trains worth of space here, which this is sort of a common miss that I see for a lot of things, is that it's pretty easy to make them a little too short. So this is kind of what you want to consider for that. We have a couple of nice little head choppers here coming across for that drop. Got our standard triple loop trope here with the big one and then the 2 medium-sized one, or same size but slightly lower back to back. These rides don't have to have a ton of flow, although, you know, they still do in their own sort of weird way. I mean, like, this is such a strange thing, but it's just something you would expect from Arrow Coaster, for example. We can speed that lift hill up because really that mid-course brake run is entirely unnecessary, pretty nearly. Give it the Viper colors here. Now for that drop, I did drop it fully on the 90 degree from the lift hill and then curved it flat. You can also drop and kind of pull out with a curve. I feel like that maybe looks a little less good on corkscrew coasters because you can't bank the diving corners. So it's a little bit of a trade-off as to what looks good versus what doesn't. So that's something you can consider, but I don't think is quite necessary. But you definitely do want to make sure, and this goes for pretty much every coaster, is that your steep part of your drop happens first and then the shallower portion happens second. It's like when you're building a B&M inverted coaster drop, you're gonna come out of the drop with a corner like this maybe, and then your first portion is going to be the less steep one. So like that's how you would do a traditional B&M fan turn, rather than having the upper diving corner and then go steep. Is really you're going to go steep and then you're going to dive on out. No pre-drop on this kind of a thing. It's all just straight off the lift hill on this one, because they really didn't care about tensioning on that. Do inverts usually have pre-dropped? Yes, at least prior to 2000, like 11 or 10 ish. That's when B&M kind of eliminated pre-drops in general from their rides. Once they adjusted their chain lift to speed up and slow down as the coaster disengages it. So the purpose of the pre-drop, which is reducing wear and tear, is now gone for that. So newer inverts like Osiris at Park Asterix or Banshee at Kings Island, or the new one they're building at Groenland, those are not going to have pre-drops, or don't have pre-drops anymore. All right, so there is our Vekoma arrow. Arrow is done. All right. So Osiris was the first one without. Also the first one with a dive loop, which is interesting that we made it that far without a dive loop on an invert. So here it is, just coming right off the thing. So took until 2012. This is a great coaster also, and is a nice segue, as Sheep is clear to point out, to Goderix. Oh, not to Goderix. There we go. Here we are. So this coaster is an infamous ride for those who have ridden it and those who haven't. I will say I didn't have a bad time on this ride. I thought it was alright, actually. I didn't get bashed around too hard, and I had a decent time. The inversions are weird and it's interesting, but it was fine. So I don't know. Your mileage may vary. I suggest you go out and ride it, but then go ride Osiris because it's far better. But this is the Vekoma version of the megalooper. So I don't know. Yes, Hydra. I think check the invert stream. I think I did for that. But so yeah, I mean, like I said, Morg, I really thought Gooders was fine. It wasn't an issue for me, but for some people, a major issue. So who knows? I think you can, go ride it and see what you think, if it's good or bad or otherwise. But I mean, they're kind of fun layouts to build. Now, Vekoma did vary the size of their inversions, but since we can't really do that, we're just gonna take what we can get. And what we can get is starting kind of in the middle. Go back. And to see here. So yeah, no, you caught that one. It's gonna be smooth and hope you guys wouldn't notice. So there's a couple inversions that just aren't typical on this kind of a ride, and or coasters in general. And one of them is the butterfly element, which we're gonna read as this bow ties or sea serpent type roll. That's the thing, is it's a great looking coaster. It's, I mean, I think they're it's a good looking ride, and it's just a little bit of a shame that it has such a reputation for being awful. But I can easily see how it would beat your face in. It's not the best feeling as far as all that goes. Probably gonna be too big of a lift hill. I know. Um, maybe. Yeah, I think it would do somewhat of an improvement. The challenge ends up being the vest can only do so much. They can't fix track work. So um, like vests on before they did the retrack on Great Nor'easter at Maurice Piers, and then the new kind of vest restraints they've got on like T3 at Kentucky Kingdom, they do nothing because the whole thing is for track work. So you end up with the coaster that's sort of shunting along, and your back keeps bouncing up against the restraint or the back of the seat, and it's just a painful experience overall. Um, Flight of Fear, for example, at Kings Island last week was just horrendous. It was surprisingly bad, and that's got lap bars, but it's because the track work just hasn't held up over time. And it is comeback, but yeah, you can't fault comeback either. They were there, did their thing. But yeah, Carolina Cobra works great. Certainly a good solution there, and there's been plenty of other instances where it's been okay. But yeah, and I do like the Vekoma or the Sun Kid trains with the lap bar only that they've put on a couple of boomerangs, and I think Speed Snake got them as well. Um, I think those are all right. That's a little quick, maybe. That's not bad though. Rid of this. That up a little bit. It definitely is interesting seeing how a good proper restraint can kind of give a ride a new lease on life. Yeah, absolutely. Bad restraints can literally ruin a ride. I mean, I'll go pick on Premier again. Their their limb coat. I mean, their original Flight of Fear rides and everything had bulky over the shoulder harnesses, and with a pretty intense ride layout, people will come back with their ears bleeding. So it's not surprising that they modified that to lap bar only. Yeah, I like Premiere. I think they do a nice job, and their new stuff is great. And actually, I really like the limb bowls too. I think Joker's Jinx and Poltergeist um, are far better than Flight of Fear, and also Rock and Roller Coaster. I mean, Rock and Roller Coaster rides better, but if I'm gonna pick a limb bowl that I want to ride, um, it's gonna be Joker's Jinx or Poltergeist probably, just because it's a more interesting coaster. But I mean, their new stuff is certainly interesting, which I appreciate. Right, I'm just comparing spaghetti bowl type coasters. Um, which like I'm just saying that I would take something um like that. But yeah, Vekoma certainly put out better stuff, but they've also completely retooled the way that they do CAD work for layouts and the way that they do track bending and everything like that. I mean, all their new facility is just an improvement for everything, pretty nearly. Um, it's hard to say. It's been a couple years between Goodrix and Viper. I probably liked Viper better, but I liked how interesting these layouts were. Um, so I can kind of take them both. They were both pretty good, as I recall. Well, I shouldn't say pretty good. They were both not awful. No, we're gonna end up going with the right. We'll go back. To be honest, there's precedent for both of them, so it doesn't really bother me which way they go. No, just the way that the coaster loaded when we went back and forth from reloading the when we loaded up the other save file. Sometimes it doesn't have the bandwidth to or the memory to load all the trains and everything, especially because we got a bunch of custom trains in here. So sometimes it has some weirdness like this, which we can easily change around. It looks like the limb ones are the ones that just didn't want to cooperate, which is fine. All right, we'll keep them as a block, and then we can load that up again later and fix it. Train coaster. Laughed at that one. All right, so we'll do something like this. Get us back to home. So hopefully the quality improves in a minute though, just because it's should be all right on my end, or at least it says it's all right, but it goes okay. All right, first of all, we're gonna fix this because this brake run's not long enough. have have spectrum, which is not necessarily better by any means. Hold it on the corner, which is not ideal, but work. Of the layouts that I built today, Hydro, or previous streams? Some of the wooden coasters I was a big fan of. There we go. I was pretty happy. Today, this one may be it so far. I mean, because a lot of these are just standard type layouts that are, I mean, they're almost purposely janky in a lot of ways. See how this rides. This isn't too bad of a layout. From an RCT visual standpoint, this is a little bit weird in that the loop is right next to this butterfly of sorts element. Um, it's a little bit close, so you'd almost want to space it out just a little bit so you don't have that interacting with each other. That would probably be my main critique on what to adjust here, so everything's got a little bit of room to breathe. This angle is probably the best so far with that, but I don't think it's that bad. I think this is decent. I feel like if we had diagonal block breaks and we had diagonal corkscrews, I'd almost come back through and go this way with it. Let me see. Spelled wrong, but there it is. Let's play this a little bit more. That not quite large enough. Granted, you can't have your block breaks and everything here, but that would be another option potentially, is go diagonal, have your block breaks there, and then come across, but gotta do that one today. Okay. Done. Okay, so next up, got two more. And we're going to jump to the stand-up coasters, because they actually came on fairly early in the development of all, coaster types of various sorts. The first one was this guy, which is Dange. And you can find a POV of this too, which is a pretty interesting layout. It kind of goes all over the place. It's a very Japanese layout, for one. But it's pretty sprawling and pretty custom as far as Togo goes. With a big loop in there, which is not the first element, which is kind of rare for them. Sort of second in line, so you have that drop there in the back, you have that hill, and then there's the loop. Another couple of hills, a helix, and then a bunch of airtime hills at the end. So this was sort of the first one that had a conversion to stand-up trains. This didn't last very long, unfortunately, so this one is gone. But there was a number of others that made it through also. Can I stream it? I don't know. Let's see if it... let's see how well this runs. I don't know I've never streamed a video before, so let's see. The quality of the video is not ideal, just FYI. Honestly, it's somewhat amazing that we even have a POV of this one, just because it's pretty rare, and a lot of the older Asian stuff is incredibly tough to get. So we got that very distinctive Togo track, which, to point of interest, is that Togo was one of the earlier ones that had guide wheels on the outside of the rails, versus the Vekoma and Arrow models, which were on the inside and didn't really hold up quite as well. So here's that flat bit to disengage the chain. And then we get a little bit of speed here. Not the most well-engineered banking. Before we have a pretty good drop. We're going to curve in here, pretty kind of choppy banks, especially there, into a fairly sizable loop. And here's a nice banking corner. They certainly weren't afraid of interesting elements like that. Into this helix that just had some kind of rough entry and exits. Especially that last bit coming underneath the lift hill, and then these 2 crazy airtime hills there before coming back into a pretty short brake run there. There's that stand-up train on the side. Looks like they were still running a sit-down train also. But yeah, so that's Dange. Yeah, that airtime is pretty crazy, and actually I found Togo's airtime in general is pretty strong on things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to have airtime. Like the custom built stand-up coasters. I mean, like Shockwave at King's Dominion, that had a straight up airtime hill, and it had airtime on it. Like you had to watch out, or you'd leave your seat. So it's it's a very odd kind of thing. So this was sort of the far end of oddball stuff, and then we got to more of the standard things like Skyrider here, that has just a pretty straightforward layout. Actually, let's see if there's a better photo of it as freestyle. This one still exists. Here's an interesting Togo weirdness, the trick track element. Which honestly doesn't do a whole heck of a lot on the ride itself. I'd rather have an airtime hill, but so it goes. So King Cobra at Kings Island, I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, this was the very first one that was actually purpose-built as a stand-up coaster. So here it is in its full glory. Pretty straightforward layout, pretty simple layout. This is actually, if you've seen the Japanese park that I'm building as my solo park, this is a pretty much copy of what's going on there. So simple but effective. Looks fine. So then there's also something like this, which is an incredibly weird layout. And it kind of has some kind of weirdness to it here, where very little of it actually comes close to touching the ground, so you can kind of see where it bounces around before coming down to a final helix at the bottom. Unfortunately, this ride had an accident on it where the one of the wheelbases sheared to some extent, and the coaster car fell against one of the catwalk railings and killed a person. So pretty bad accident, actually. One of the worst Japanese coaster accidents out there. And this prompted the closure of Expo Land Park as a whole, which is how Wally Got Her Park in France got their giant inverted coaster. This one doesn't have a loop in it. It's just I don't really even know what you'd call it. It's honestly like a mine train that's a stand-up coaster, which Arrow got into the stand-up coaster business also, and made a coaster called. Let's see here. Let's get to St. Louis. Six Flags St. Louis. Or sorry, that was Extreme Roller. But let's look at this one. So they had Arrow got into the stand-up coaster business in a couple of different ways. They modified a corkscrew coaster, the standard Arrow corkscrew coaster, to have a stand-up train. There it is. Extreme Roller, EXT. So here it is where it was an original corkscrew coaster. And then at some point they put these trains on it. See if there's a better shot. So you can kind of see here. They weren't really the most scientifically engineered coaster trains that you've ever come across. You can kind of see the pads there in the front that kind of opened and closed. There really wasn't like a bicycle seat that you stood on. You just kind of got in there and then pulled those harnesses up and over. It was not good looking for one, and apparently it was very rough per the other, which would not surprise me. I mean, your whole the Arrow corkscrew coaster on its own isn't super intense or super comfortable in the first place, much less when you're standing up on the thing and the entire center line has changed. So not the most comfortable. But then, not to be outdone, they went and put it on a mine train. So it was on River King mine train, which did start off as a double mine train, and put a stand-up coaster train on this, which, I mean, hard to imagine that it would be any kind of okay. But you know, an Arrow mine train had a stand-up coaster train on it. Also had problems. Also had an accident on it. As far as I believe, it did kill a woman, which is a shame. But then was redone into a regular mine train coaster again. So Arrow's foray into the stand-up coaster business was short-lived at best. So only one season, and that was pretty much all we saw from them. So what we'll do is kind of look at our standard Togo type layout here. Again, building backwards up the drop, because that lets you make sure that your drop is going to hit in just the right spot. Oh, good call. Coffee. Ar. It would be a pretty fun kind of park to do in RCT at some point. It was just like a bunch of the old concepts that just were a disaster of some kind or another. It'd be kind of neat to see how that could be handled. And it didn't even have to be disaster ride, really. You could just do a yeah. I mean, there's just, I guess, things that didn't go well. So I mean, you're right in that case, like chiller. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Actually, I would enjoy seeing that. All right, so we want to hit here. I guess that's going to give us 6 across to the brake run. I'll build orphan rocker. That would have been a neat one to see. I would have really enjoyed actually having to see that one see the light of day. Put some good airtime on this. Yeah, the partial POV is crazy. I mean, even though it's sped up, it's still just like absolutely wild that it was even a thing. All right. Trick track and everything. We're gonna stick that in here. These are 6-car trains generally. Not always. But for the most part, we're gonna say 6-car train. Do entire thing was accidentally built with lift hill turned on. Yeah, it is pretty amazing that. I mean, anybody wrote it for one. Like that's one of those very short list of like infamous coasters that either didn't operate or barely operated that I would have loved to have done, like that or Vertigo Rama down in Buenos Aires, or yeah, Ring Racer is another one that barely operated for a year, and even still that was fraught with all sorts of issues. And Alpenflug, the portable suspended coaster. I mean, all those kind of things I think would be really incredible to try. Alrighty, check this out. It's almost kind of a surprise that we even got this coaster in RCT. It's a little surprising to me that they would bother to um, even put this into the game, but I'm happy that it's here. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Good selection there. I mean, you can put Volcano on that list. I mean, even though they eventually worked out the operational issues, it was still an issue. Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. It was a shame to lose Volcano. I mean, I understand why it had to happen, but like, it still makes it a little bit sad. All right, and then I'm going to paint this one black. It is black. In honor of the one of these that's still running at in Italy, we're gonna paint it here. Yeah, yeah, Stingray. I mean, from what I understood, it worked fine and it operated well enough. But it is a shame that they only sold one. My guess is that it was too expensive. Alrighty, so that is the second to last one that is on the list. We're getting there. Got our nice little collection growing here. So let's take a look at our last one. So Intamin. Yeah, no, you're right, Chief. I mean, there's a number of issues related to it for sure. So before B&M got into stand-up coasters, back when B&M was working for Intamin, um, and after Togo had introduced the stand-up coaster, and after Arrow had kind of tried and failed on theirs, we got the Intamin stand-up coaster. Um, so there were a couple of different, or two basic models. Six Flags had purchased this um, in as part of its ride rotation program, where in the late '80s and '90s they would buy a coaster, put it into the park for say 2-3 years, and then move it to a different park. So that's how we have Flashback, which moved from Great America to over Georgia to Magic Mountain. That's how we got Togo Ultra Twister from Great Adventure over to Astro World, and then over to America where it wasn't put up. And that's how we got the stand-up coaster that moved around from Great Adventure to Magic Mountain and down to Fiesta or Astro World again, and then up to Darien Lake where it bit the dust. And then also there's a copy of this that ended up in Denmark initially, and then went to I think it just went straight to, or on actually Sweden, not Denmark, Skara Sommerland, and then went to Cobra and Laurent, where it was demolished, unfortunately. But those both shared the same layout, which is this. And actually, you can see a lot of B&M in this layout. So it's got, I mean, obviously from the fact that it has Giovanola track, which came to be known as sort of the B&M track for one. But if you even look at the first half of this is very much a B&M looking coaster, where you've got that nice fan curve after the pre-drop, you got the big loop, have that inclined helix, and then there's this airtime hill up underneath the mid-course, and then up and around into the mid-course brakes. Then after that, it kind of meanders its way. But this first half is very, very B&M. So you can kind of see what they took and borrowed as they put it into theirs once they got going in the 90s. I could do a B&M stand-up one because they did get started in '89, but we've already sort of tackled that, so we're not going to touch that one today. So we will do the Intamin one. But yeah, it's pretty interesting overall on there. It has anti-rollbacks into the mid-course brakes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these older coasters, if they weren't sure if a gust of wind could take it out, then I'd rather pull it from there and in. But I don't know. Let's see. I don't recall it having that, but let's take a look. All right, Biden 2020. Well, at least it's not Trump. Enjoy this political ad. All right. Yeah, it's a shame. I'll take 100 Biden ads before I have to take another Trump ad. All right. So I did get to ride this one before it went. It was not good, like not at all. So you have that incline helix. There's that. Let's see. Yeah, it almost looks like there is right in there. Kind of catch it real briefly, um, and then there's this, which is we talked earlier about threading, forcing threading of the loops, and I think this is one of those things where it was almost forced to thread the loop because look at how little this does for basically the entire rest of the layout. I mean, we're almost on the ground because those base plates went right down to the footer, and it really does nothing. There are no forces. There is no air time. It's not exciting really in any means. It's just getting additional track length out of it. So, not super thrilling. Now in the '90s, they did come back with one more, and at Drayton Manor, which does kind of even less arguably. But what it added that the other ones did not is a zero G roll, and it is the only and remains the only zero G roll on a stand-up coaster. So coming in pretty late in the game, but also pretty interesting. So this is the one that I'm always sort of interested in, and hopefully I can get a ride on it here eventually. Um, but it's an oddball layout because it has the drop, the loop, the zero G roll, two corkscrews, and then pretty much nothing. You mean at Laurent Sheep? Um, yeah, I don't actually remember where they're putting the Zack spin, but they have that space open, and they also have that corkscrew with bearing curve that they got rid of last year. So, I mean the Zack spin's going to replace one of them, and I had heard some rumblings about RMC Monster to some extent. I don't know if that's still on the tables or not, but who knows? All right. So let's get a stand-up coaster. All right, we'll start 3 off the ground. Just that's every RMC though. Structural issues the ride. Uh, it's not the best. Oh, thanks, Holly. Been a couple. I don't know how many has that been. Like, all right, so 6. I feel like the structure was just one of those early Cobb coaster things. It just kind of was, um, and they weren't good by any means. Um, but the layout was interesting, and I'm sure early Monster was a fun time. Okay. Is the stand-up twister. Excuse me. So on these, you want a 6-car train. That's it. That's tiny. It wouldn't surprise me if it did to some extent, because it, even though it is an icon, it also needs some help. So we'll see. It was on the table for a little while. I can confirm that. So we'll see if it actually becomes a full deal or not. And how they do it. Are they going to do one like Iron Gwazi, or are they going to do, say, one big Mobius one, or are they going to do, how does that turn out? Oh, thanks for the follow, Kyle. We'll head up into that mid-course breaks. Yeah, no, I understand that. I can tell you mine's not just throwing it around. But we'll see if it does or does not happen. Iron Wolf was not good. Iron Wolf was pretty sad by the time I got to it. I didn't get to it until it got to a Six Flags America, but it was running pretty poorly. That's a little bit too close there. End there. No, I wouldn't say this one is better. I just say they both suck. Uh, which is, I mean, it's an unfortunate thing to say because they're interesting rides. It's just they're not good by any means. Trying to find our way back if we're gonna do more or less a recreation here. Again, this is one of those not very good recreations. It's just coaster being sort of there. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it. I like to have something good to say about most coasters, but some of the early stand-up coasters were not the finest efforts of either. I'm sure it was B&M or through the middle here. Not quite how it's actually done, but I mean that's a lot of the early Intamin coasters just aren't very good, um, which is a shame because I mean they make some pretty incredible stuff now, and really when you look at a lot of it, it's just um, it's a little bit of a shame because you know they can make cool stuff and they do now, but some of the earlier things were pretty unpleasant. Oh yeah, Flashback was one. I mean, really, I would say you look up anything that Giovanola fabricated, um, and you can find out that information in that way. Um, but yeah, I think it is only that. You can sneak it under here somewhere. Getting into a little bit of coaster spaghetti in the middle here. I'm not real big on. Yeah, they did a lot more family coaster than anything. You know, those early ones, there wasn't a whole lot going on as far as the intense ride design goes. They weren't sort of the juggernaut of coaster building that they are now, but they also subcontracted a lot of stuff. So they were the broker and a middleman for a lot of different stuff. It was awful. Yeah, I mean, Intamin really kind of, they were the early coaster brokers in a lot of cases, and not just coasters, but other rides too. Is you had representation. It's like Martin and Vlemenex is the one who represents um, Gravity Group in Asia, or Vekoma are the ones who represent RMC in Europe. Um, I haven't really looked, to be honest. I don't think it's great, but it's not like terrible either. Go with Scara Summerland colors. Add. Fortunately, I can't do the loop because the loop was this like red and white striped thing. But I can at least do it like. Yeah, I mean that's the problem is you can't do a dive that has an offset of 1 or 2 unless you do the big inversion, and that was too big for the ride. So you really weren't going to be able to get a lot of that kind of stuff. So here's the Intamin coaster. I mean, it doesn't do terribly much, and the flow is not ideal, but it works. I would say the this turn here that it's going through is a little bit high. It'd be really nice if, you know, at some point here, if we end up getting additional track pieces, be able to get a diving and climbing slope that were like half that size, then you could have slightly adjusted helixes and things like that, just to offer some additional changes for that. But, oh, and I missed the thank you for the follow, boy MK. But yes, this is an Intamin stand-up, so we're using the 6-car trains. I mean, granted, it's using the stand-up cars here are very much shaped like the B&M ones. The Intamin ones have more of a squat nose, and are a little bit different overall, but for the most part, it's pretty similar across the whole thing. So, yeah, this is, we would call this an Intamin stand-up coaster. All right, so we checked that one off. We have actually hit all of our stuff. We're not even at the 3.5 hour mark today, so not too bad, I would say, overall. Are there any looping coasters that you guys would like to see? beyond just these. I'm thinking pre-1990s still. Because I had suggested, or I had seen suggested earlier Hopkins. I had seen suggested um, which one? Soquet, another pretty interesting one at least. But yeah, Iron Wolf is B&M. You're correct. Yeah, it's quick. And at least this is the only one that we get to do the big inversion on, really, because all the other ones are small inversion based, which is stands. All right, so Kat, all right, let's take a look at it and see what we can do with it. So, what are they calling it now? Diaboliska Petla. Interesting. All right. Batman and Robin was 1990s, so that one we'll save for another time. Actually, hadn't seen the artwork on the loop. That's very interesting. So anyway, Soquet. Soquet is a French company. They make generally pretty mild, like Mine Train-esque type coasters. And then they also came in and did a couple of these like big looping coasters. They did 2 of these, I think. Somewhat different layouts, even though they're pretty much the similar design. Interesting track style too. Their other track style is more like a V. These are kind of almost squat box-like, sort of like an Intamin quad rail, just flatter. They also have trains that have a rear car where one of the seats faces backwards, which is cool. I also am a big fan of this chain lift here, where the chain just hangs free and then catches down here and then goes back through. So a little bit oddball stuff. It's very homemade, I guess you should say. So Tic Tac was one of the sponsors of this one for a while. It was the Tic Tac Tornado for a little while. So I guess Tic Tacs must be larger or a bigger thing in Poland than I kind of thought they were. But here it is in its initial one. Yeah, they did do King, which I'm told is pretty awful. And then they have a couple others here, but let's let's find that real quick. So get by inversions. Right. So Salitre Magico, which got relocated down there from Seabreeze. This is a little more compact of one and looks to be something that was made for the fair circuit potentially, because the whole thing's up on a frame. This one is a little more of a reasonable layout as far as flow goes and just other things like yeah, this is the Seabreeze one sheet that we're looking at now. Not a bad layout. I mean, the thing is, it doesn't really do a whole lot of anything. You have your 2 loops, your back-to-back loops, and then right after that, it's just sort of a low and slow figure 8 with a helix in there, and that's pretty much it. So it's sort of like a poor man's looping star, I guess you could say. But let's yeah, let's go with it. So yeah, it did tour for a little while. I think the best way that you would do this from a track standpoint is probably build this as a mini coaster and then put a second layout just at the half tile below it. It's probably going to look really awful, but that may be the best way to do it. Let's find some space. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Double looping, considering that this one at least has a second loop. How many cars does this thing have? 6 cars. This one does not have the special reversed one. I don't know what vehicle we want to use for this. Go with the old local cars. No, because it's not tri-rail. It's the track when you get up close enough to look to it. It's not the RCT tri-rail track. It's really a big box. So it's. I'm trying to find a good shot of that. Here we go. So it never hits any of the tri-rail. Like, if anything, you would use the impulse, but you can't do corners on that, unfortunately. It's a pretty odd track design, kind of beefy, not terribly strong, but there's a lot to it. So let's, yeah. So Intamin track being bi-rail, tri-rail, quad rail. Quad rail being the 4 pieces, like the impulse coaster is in that. Yeah, Dragonfire is definitely one of those failed, or at least infamous rides. Oh, yep. Shots. I'm going back and forth and looking at the pictures while putting this together. Probably a little bit less overall height. Two, three, 6. 1, 2. Yeah, shot 4. Are you feeling that one? Feel it now, Squidward? Alright. Sir, Mr. Krabs, was it now? Okay. Oh, let's build a looping code. These are back to back. This is another one of those things where the game could really use some larger corners for one. It's slow, but it works. Yeah, once you got into the 90s, it got interesting, but until then, it was kind of dull almost. All right. Yeah, once people figured out that you could make a looper that wasn't awful, like that wasn't one of the um, arrow or arrow looping things, then I think the whole everything changed really. Let's take this and get it a little higher off the ground. Well, and yeah, once we got into computer drawing and things like that, I mean, it was definitely improved. I mean, Schwarzkopf was the one to figure it out, at least in the beginning, and then until others caught on. But yeah, that was kind of amazing that it was really just him for the longest time making decent stuff, and then um, honestly, Vekoma had big loops uh, early on, but only pre-90s looper nearby. Oh, the Steam Demon was terrible. Oh man, that was one of those awful rides. Yeah, Schwarzkopf and Stengel knew what was up. I mean, they were certainly ahead of the curve. All right, let us trains here. Then this one is white, blue. We were gonna go with a junior. May look even better. If you don't have the, yeah, I feel like your best bet for this is gonna be one of the oddball ones, but let's try something. The Soquet. I forgot I can't raise this up on a half tile. Shoot. Mostly I just want to experiment and see if it's gonna look bad or not. Do it this way. It's surprising how many of the early ones are still kind of holding up reasonably well. Um, they're not the Schwarzkopf ones especially, but I mean even the arrow coasters. But there was just so little to an arrow coaster, as you really didn't even have to put a lot of effort into it. Kennedy's corkscrew was not too bad, to be honest. At least as far as corkscrews went. Yeah, I mean, it's not something I'm going to really go back on a lot, but to be honest, there's really not a whole, coaster-wise, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot at Canopy that's going to keep me doing uh, new stuff. Um, Untamed is not very good. Has a couple of good shots in there, and I mean, Yankee Cannonball is where it's at as far as coaster goes, but that's about it. So this is not the best looking, but it's, to be honest, maybe better than it'd be otherwise. Yeah, old Chicago was the one in Illinois. Um, pretty, pretty impressive. At the time, it was one of the larger looping coaster, or well, one of the larger any kind of coasters inside. I mean, granted, there's much larger coasters inside now, but at the time it was pretty unique. Yeah, for sure. I did a road trip a couple years ago, and we hit up those among others. Yep, Mindbender still being the biggest, and well, actually, no, Takabisha's the biggest now, or American Takabisha. And Canopy's got some nice classic stuff. They still have one of the few rotors left. Um, World, or at least especially in the U.S. Oh, I do love the Mine of Lost Souls. Honestly, that is a great ride. Yeah, actually, the track doesn't look terrible. It doesn't really look good either, but it's not awful. With some custom support work and some other stuff, it could come out being not half bad. Yeah, it's a cool, and honestly, for a small park dark ride as it is, it's got some kind of neat stuff in it. Well, that's cool. I'm glad that they're running that again with the lights off, because it kind of loses something when you go in there and it's just spinning around and the lights are on. Six Flags Over Georgia used to have one where the lights were off. And then they did it as like a 50s theme with projections and stuff, and that was cool, but it's not quite what it used to be. Worlds of Fun has an indoor rodeo, and those are fun. That one is pretty wild actually, and it gets close to the walls. I mean, obviously well within tolerances of whatever, but still pretty cool. All right, so there's the Soquet one, which actually I gotta say this turned out better than I expected it to. I don't know if you guys agree, but I was not expecting anything on here. But I will. I mean, not that the layout is anything to write home about, but it's not bad. It feels sort of janky and fairground-ish. I could easily see doing like a fairground park and including this in the corner. But not too bad. Well, let's take our review as we usually do, and I'll look at what was done. Here's our standard corkscrew coaster. I think is just fine. Works well enough. Here it is. Then we did our sprawling Schwarzkopf coaster. Always nice, but pretty straightforward. Pretty expansive. Not necessarily best of things, but not too bad either. And here we go. Then we did our Vekoma double looping, double corkscrew, which is probably the worst one today, just based on how far things were spread apart. Excuse me. So little rough there. Then we did our Togo stand-up coaster here, which is still chugging away with the rock trains here. So that's doing its thing, taking care of itself. We did the Schwarzkopf traveling fairground ride, which is holding up all right. Our Arrow megalooper here, 7 inversions. Yeah, it's just that it didn't load properly. If I load a different park and then open this one up again, it should theoretically load up again properly. So when I post the download link, it'll work. And then we have one. We have our Vekoma megalooper. It is. And then the Togo stand-up and the Intamin stand-up. Any pointers for interlocking loops? Good question. So what I would say is typically you're only going to interlock loops on a B&M coaster, because really you didn't get a whole lot of that ever on any of the other corkscrew type coasters. It's really just a B&M thing, and it's also pretty limited to it's interlocking loops. We're talking interlocking corkscrews. Oh, sorry, interlocking loops. Shoot, I read that entirely wrong. Oh, oops. Yeah. So ignore what I just said for the last like minute and a half. Yeah, interlocking loops are pretty interesting, pretty cool thing. You can kind of Orient Express, which is no longer here, and then Loch Ness Monster. Those are really the only two options that you have to work with. But it's really just a matter of getting it to line up properly. So when you put your one loop in, just making sure that next one can line up just right. And honestly, I would almost say you go through and interlock your loops early, like first, and then match it up, so then you don't have to get there and then be disappointed when you do get there and it doesn't fit. Off. I think Marcel or somebody's got a trick out there for actually matching these properly. But yeah, that is a good tip, making sure that the 4 center squares are properly there. Oh, we're a little bit too low, I think. But let's just do it like this. Go. Done. But so when you do interlock your stuff, what you got to make sure of is that you got enough speed to do both of them, but you're also not killing your speed and to the point where you you got to have another lift tool, which is what Loch Ness needs, or you're not going way too fast through one of them to become that. Excuse me. Go. That's interesting. Yeah, I recall seeing some of the stuff on the various kind of bugs and things that are still challenges on the game, which is a shame that that's an issue. And then, of course, we have the boomerang, which when it was introduced, Worlds of Fun was known as the kamikaze curve, which may or may not have been in good taste. Yeah, that's true. Although I can live with Orient Express a little more than the other, but yeah, Worlds of Fun was sort of an odd park. Yeah, the Bamboozler. Gotta love good old park names or ride names. Yeah, I mean the whole park is themed to around the world in 80 days, which is interesting. Right. It actually came together reasonably well. minute. You're right, though. There was never a medium dipper. To correct that. We're going to call this one the medium dipper. And only the 11 of us are in the stream are going to know what that has to do with anything. Let's see how the pacing is, considering that I didn't do any kind of testing on this ahead of time. My guess is that those corkscrews are going to be way too fast. In total, I don't think this layout is bad. I think it could probably be... I think it could use some further stretching out. But it should be fine. Oh yeah, the Schwarzkopf stuff is great. I mean, those early Schwarzkopf ones. I think with Nessie, the thing that always surprised me was just that the layout was such a weird, abrupt ending. Oh, it is too fast in those corkscrews. Yikes! Wow, not great. But other than that, it's not bad. I mean, Nessie's got like a great first half, and then the second half just doesn't exist. Like, it's got an excellent drop into that whale's mouth. It's just or the Nessie, and then it just ends. Yeah, mid course would probably help. I was trying to go for Orient Express, which doesn't have one. Well, it does. It's just up further on the layout. The loop ends up going straight into the Batwing, which really the Batwing I'm not displeased with. I think this the pacing is okay. I probably would have just come out of that diving left turn with a smaller one rather than the larger one to bring the corkscrews up a little bit, and then I think that would look fine. But I can go either way on it. I think it turned out okay. But well, there's two bonus ones. We got our other ones, our Soquet one, and then this guy, and we'll go ahead and give this some nice stereotypical Asian colors. There we go. Yeah, I would agree with you. Tennessee Tornado is great. Actually, just rode it last weekend, and it's running pretty well. Still, it's amazing how it's still smooth despite the questionable shaping of things. But it runs well. It certainly holds up. I can't fault that. But so there we are. Well, I think the Asian music. All right, fine. We're gonna go all in on that one. Where is the Oriental? Wasn't it called? There you go. You guys. Do I have that one? I do. I do. All right, there we go. Done. Good. I always did like the Oriental music in this game, though. It was nice. The medium dipper doesn't quite fit for this, though. If it was actually Chinese, it would be like super speed, like Cool Bear 3000. But not too bad. So we'll leave it at that, I think. But be the Dragon 3000 more than the first one. It's fine. Well, I think that will probably wrap us up for today. I have a couple of thoughts for next week. So I know I had posted this in Discord, or the various Discords, the NE, RCNF, and Dirklinks, about um, future stuff. All the B&M models was one of them at one point, and this one did win out. I'm also looking at modern launch coasters at some point. I would like to do compact hypercoaster. Well, I shouldn't say hypercoaster, but compact loopers such as like the Megalite, the Mach Megalite, the Chance Hyper GTX, and stuff like that. 90s loopers is a good one too. I'll have to write that one down. I think we're rapidly checking a lot of the boxes as far as coasters go. I mean, there's plenty more that we can do, and you can build layouts for years. So, as long as there's kind of interest, I might consider on that sort of a thing. A Wild Mouse episode honestly wouldn't be the worst, just because there is a lot of variety there. And I think my goal in this whole stream thing, I mean, besides just showing how to build realistic coasters, is also to show what's out there, like weird coaster stuff that, or coaster models that you might not otherwise be aware of. I mean, I know some of you guys are, but for the most part, I want to try and find some new things to show you guys. So that's sort of the goal here. So if you have other suggestions, message me on any one of the discords, or send me something on YouTube. So if you're not following the YouTube channel, which is where I post all of this plus other stuff, go subscribe to that. The link is down below. And then if you want to support this channel, feel free to subscribe. If you have Amazon Prime, you can do it for free, actually, and it still helps out the channel. So, but even just being here is a help. Viewership always is good. So we're working on bumping the YouTube channel up and keeping that one growing. And I do want to expand that into some other things. I'm also considering making a separate Discord, and I know everybody's doing that at this point, but setting up one that's just a repository for a lot of the stuff here, for all the suggestions that I have, layout feedback, and just kind of coaster realism talk and all that. So I'm going to try and set that up this week. I was going to wait until I had a few more YouTube subscribers, but to be honest, I think we can make it work right now. And yeah, so I think it should be all right. So we'll see how that one goes, and make it community focused at least, and get what you guys want out of it. So, I mean, as always, thanks for showing up for this, and we'll be back next Saturday. I've got, I think, 2 to 3 more Saturdays in a row, and then I'm off to Lagoon and seeing another real park, which is going to be nice, and then we'll jump back on it. I'm going to try and keep doing it every Saturday here that I'm available and here at home. So thank you guys for watching, and I think we'll wrap it up there. And if you have thoughts and comments and anything else, feel free to let me know. So until next time, we're going to go out on the Oriental music, because that's what we got to do. I'll see you guys.